Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Nathan Pomart and this is Loose, the Climate Tech podcast. Every week we interview a founder and explore the stories, ideas, innovations, and businesses behind some of the most inspiring climate tech companies that have a tangible positive impact on our planet. This show is designed to help you learn, instigate optimism, and inspire further action towards addressing the climate change challenge that we face as a global community. If you are an entrepreneur, business leader, or investor interested in learning more about the climate tech space and how you can play a part in it, this show is for you. My guest today is Tim Hysell. Tim is the CEO and co-founder of ZincFive, an Oregon-based manufacturer of nickel-zinc batteries. ZincFive offers powerful battery solutions for mission-critical applications that need to be on all the time. ZincFive offers an alternative to other battery technologies such as lead acid or lithium ion that is safer, more sustainable, and more reliable. ZincFive recently completed a $75 million Series D from OGCI Investments. A repeat entrepreneur with more than 3 decades of experience, Tim started ZincFive after perceiving the lack of good solution in the fast discharge battery space for critical applications. That is the focus of our discussion. In this episode, you will learn about the relative merits and environmental footprints of the different battery technologies, the latest innovation in this space so critical to support our energy transition, and what is driving the very fast adoption of new battery technologies in the data center industry. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Tim Hysell. So, Tim, welcome to the show,
Thank you, Nathan.
and thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this on a Friday afternoon. I'm very excited for this conversation. Batteries are so fundamental to the energy transition, the electrification of our economy. And at the same time, they can be controversial sometimes with the issues around the environment and social footprint of extracting the raw materials and the poor recyclability of some of the existing batteries. So that's exactly where you come in. It promises to be a fascinating discussion, and I'm quite excited for it.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're happy to share our story.
So let's start with you, Tim. You have 3 decades of entrepreneurial experience. What's the backstory and how did that lead to you starting ZincFive?
Yeah, it really began. Um, I acquired a company of all things in the traffic space, meaning traffic where you provide electronics and alike for signalized intersections, so stoplights that we drive through every day. I acquired that company back in 2006. And what I came to realize with my engineering team was there was a real deficiency around backing up those intersections when utility power was lost. And the only solution that was available at the time was lead acid batteries, which we all have grown up with. So we started that journey thinking we wanted to build an alternative to lead acid for that particular use case. So it was a longer journey than we thought it would be, but we found a battery chemistry called nickel-zinc. And we fell in love with nickel-zinc because of several reasons. There's safety involved. The climate impact story is outstanding. And there's a number of other things I'm sure we'll talk about during our time together. But the bottom line is we innovated the first ever full-scale battery backup system for that particular market using the nickel-zinc batteries. No one in the world had ever done that. And so we did that. And then in November, really where the company, I think, began was in November of 2016. And that's where we merged that company, which was called PowerGenix. We merged PowerGenix into ZincFive. And now we sit here today with the ability to solve enormous world problems with our battery chemistry, as well as the innovation around the batteries, or what we call product solutions. So it's pretty exciting. We can go anywhere in the world we want to go. The batteries have so many wonderful attributes, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it's just, becoming a company that's more than just a battery manufacturer, which we do, but also providing innovative solutions for particular markets, which I know we'll talk about markets in a few minutes.
I'd love to zoom on ZincFive mission and what drives you as a founder and as a team. Thinking big picture, what is the impact that you set out to have on the world?
Yeah, it's a host of things. When we look at our products, we want to harness what we call the power of good chemistry for the world. And what do we mean by the power of good chemistry? Well, the power of good chemistry is not just a good product. It's really the chemistry itself. Is it good for the planet? Is it good for our world? Does it have high recyclability? Is it safe? Safety is more important today than ever before because people hear stories every day about batteries having catastrophic events out there. So is it safe? Is it abundant? What does it do to help drive what's called the total cost of ownership down for particular markets? As I've said before on many interviews, you can have the best product and best battery chemistry in the world, but if you can't compete economically against the incumbents, the world won't adopt you no matter how important many of these other attributes are. So what we really look to solve for is basically a reduction in the use of lithium batteries and lead acid batteries because of the impact they have on climate, but also offering what we bring to the table with the power of good chemistry where it's safe. We're bringing in solid partners. The materials are abundant. So it's really a holistic view of what our impact is on the climate.
And Tim, for those listening who are less familiar with the different types of batteries and their use cases, could you paint the picture of where you fitting with the nickel zinc battery technology compared to the other ones you mentioned? And for which applications is your technology most useful?
Absolutely. So our battery tech, we learned long ago that you have to find the markets where your battery chemistry is best suited in terms of its performance. So in our case, we call it immediate power. So when you think of immediate power, think of mission critical applications, right? Data centers. We don't want our data centers to go down. We wouldn't be having this interview right now if a data center went down that's hosting this. So data
Yeah.
centers, mission critical, very applicable to us. But to your primary question, you have to look at the duration of the discharge that the batteries have to go through and how many times it needs to do that. So we believe our battery is the best in the world at discharging in 15 minutes or less. And if you look at, say, for instance, data centers, they need batteries for 3 to 5 minutes just for the on-site generators to power up. And so it doesn't disrupt things like we're doing right now. Now, when you look at other battery chemistries in that 15 minutes or less, that's difficult for lithium because there's more and more fears around fire, thermal runaway, and explosion. If you look at lead acid batteries, which is another one of the historical battery chemistries used in data centers, if you look at that battery chemistry, it's really designed to be discharged over hours and hours and hours. So a very slow discharge, not 15 minutes or less.
Mhm.
So if you try to use lead acid for that, the package gets incredibly large to try to do that. If you look at lithium, it's a bigger package size-wise than nickel zinc is. And that's simply because we discharge so much faster, we can be in a smaller footprint. So that then creates a whole nother set of advantages that we have. Reduction in total square footage needed, safety, as I said earlier. We don't need fire suppression in data centers. Obviously, that's not the case with other battery chemistries. So really, there's a lot of differentiators between ZincFive and say lithium ion or lead acid batteries. But it's that, to answer your question, Nathan, very clearly, it's that 15 minutes or less is where we feel we can't be beat.
It seems also that there is a sustainability differentiator between nickel zinc and lithium ion and lead acid. Could you talk through the life cycle of a battery from raw materials to recycling after the battery life? And where does the added sustainability of nickel zinc batteries come in?
Absolutely. So, and I'll give you some hard numbers here in a second that we did with an independent party. But if you take a look at the raws, you have to say how abundant are your raw materials? How easily are they mined? How many places around the world can it be mined? And so that's really one of the fundamentals. And then when you build the batteries, you have, okay, battery manufacturing, how much water are you using? We use hardly any, for example, in the manufacturing side. How much safety issues are there? What impact are you having in terms of CO2 emissions at your manufacturing level, right? That's important. Then you take a
Yeah.
look at transportation costs. Batteries are heavy no matter whose battery you're looking at. Some are lighter, like ours and
Hmm.
lithium, but nonetheless, the cost of transportation is one thing. And then ultimately, it goes into a product. You have e waste, possibly, not possibly, you do when it needs to be recycled, and the batteries as well. But then they go to the customers, right? Every technology has an end of life. So those products and those batteries reach end of life, now what happens? Well, is there real value in the recycling process with the battery chemistry? In ours, we're over 90% recyclable. That's impressive, right? We can reuse that.
How does that
Lithium,
compare to the other battery technologies?
well, it's a fundamental problem with lithium right now is they're
Mm.
trying to figure out ways to recycle the batteries, but it's difficult because the cost of the recycling of the lithium batteries and what you get out on the other end, that cost, it almost starts to go back to it's less expensive to just keep pulling it out of the earth, right? Where that's not the
Yeah.
case with nickel zinc. Even to defend lead acid, lead acid's highly recyclable, right? But the problem with lead acid is it's not always recycled in a very safe way around the entire world. Third world
Mm.
countries, have real issues with this, and you have, hazardous lead and alike. So, but the bottom line is we're over 90% recyclable. And if I could give you just a quantifiable look at that relative to that independent study we had done or worked with a company to do, we had a independent study done by a company called Boundless Climate Impact. And I bring them up only because anybody that claims that as a company that claims that you have recyclability and you have a good climate impact story, you have to have third party validation of that. You just can't say it, right? It's got to
Yeah.
be validated. So we had a study done independently, and it proved that nickel zinc batteries are abundantly more positive impact than other battery chemistries. But I tell you that because we've taken that in one step further, and we started to look at particular vertical markets that adopt our technology. So let me use data centers as an example. In a data center,
Hmm.
if you were to deploy 1.2 megawatts of power to back up a data center, I want to equate this in terms of offset of CO2 emissions, our chemistry versus lithium versus lead acid. And I'll do this illustration with mature trees. So, how many mature trees do we save by using our technology over those other two chemistries? Here's the
Hmm.
answer. Lead acid batteries, we save over 17,000 mature trees just for 1.2 megawatts of deployment. There's gigawatts deployed annually across the world, right?
Yes.
If you compare that to lithium, we save they take up 4,500 more mature trees for every 1.2 megawatts. That's amazing. Where we only take up 1,000 in terms of our total footprint. So you look at
Yes.
1,000 versus 4,500 versus 17,000, and it puts it in perspective.
And that's coming from the increased recyclability and also from the more abundant raw materials that you are leveraging, and from the fact that your manufacturing process is less CO2 intensive than the other technologies. Is that a fair
That's
summary?
right. Yeah, that's right. And you also look at all the way back to the life cycle of recycling and the transportation costs and the CO2
Got it.
emissions that take place with pure transportation, right? It all adds up in terms of the impact on our planet.
And we'll get back into the manufacturing process because I love to dive into this. As a segue into this, let's dive into your product and your business, and let's start with the hard stuff. So what is critical to get right when you make batteries and battery
Mm.
cabinets? What is it that you want to get right for your customers to be happy?
Yeah, well, the battery chemistry, like we talked about earlier, the battery chemistry has to be the right fit for that particular use case. In our case, immediate power, short duration discharging, 15 minutes or less. We can go longer, by the way, Nathan, with discharging our batteries,
Yeah.
but it's all about economics. When you start getting out there in those longer durations, even though we can do it, unless you don't want to use, say, lithium for reasons around safety, environmental impact, sustainability, all these things. If if you're not concerned about that, a longer duration discharge need is really, quite frankly, better served by lithium. For instance, electric vehicles, right?
Got it.
Electric vehicles, long
Yes.
discharge. It's not short discharges. The concerns around safety are there, but lithium is probably the best battery chemistry for that, for example. So anyhow,
Yeah.
back to our side of the story is you have to make sure it's the right battery fit. So we're the right fit. But then what we learned long ago is you can't just throw a battery into a particular vertical market because you think it's the right battery chemistry. You have to bring solutions to that space, right? To make it easy for
What does
adoption.
that mean?
That means taking your batteries and turning them into a full scale product. So in our case, the words used in our industry is battery backup or UPS, but battery backup. So what we did in the data center space is we designed a, if numbers mean anything, a 265 kW battery cabinet with our nickel zinc batteries. And that was a solution that is compatible with these large outside equipment manufacturers called, the ABBs, Vertiv, Schneiders, and so on and so forth. They didn't have to do hardly
Yes.
any work to couple it up with their UPS. That's allowed us to have significant adoption in this space in a very rapid cadence. So I don't know if does that
So
answer
as
your
you
question?
it it does, and what I'm hearing is one of the things that you want to get right is make it as easy as possible for your customers to adopt your new technology in a context where there may have been infrastructure built around a legacy technology or a previously
Yeah,
existing technology in the form of lead acid, if I
that's
got
right.
that right.
No, you did,
um,
and I'll make it simple. Is we have to remove the pain points, right? The pain points that that industry goes through to adopt a new technology, no matter how good it is. So that's what allowed us to build that product, the battery cabinet, for these corporations, because it needs to be easy and motivational for them to adopt a new technology. You can't expect each one of
yes.
those large corporations to do all that work on your behalf. It's just a lesson learned in the battery space.
And zooming in on the on the process of making batteries and solutions, what is the input that you work with, and what are the key critical steps that you need to nail in order to get your end product at the level of quality that you are shooting for?
Yeah, it's a long process. First off, the batteries need to be characterized in the manufacturing process, and they have to be reproducible and scalable, which ZincFive has already done with our batteries, our nickel zinc batteries, the batteries themselves. So you have to reach that place in your maturation before you can ever take your batteries and go to some market. So that's step one: stable, high volume manufacturing, reproducible, high yields, etc. And then you take them and you put them into products. And then on the product side, there's a massive amount of testing there, as you can imagine, because you're going into mission critical applications, things that they can't afford to have you fail, right? There's big events if you do. So you have to prove that the product solution with your battery chemistry in it now meets all of their specifications. Does it charge and discharge the right amount of times? How does it perform at certain temperatures? And a host of other things. And then that customer looks at all other aspects about implementing it into the data center, for example, like who's going to be the support organization, right? So it's a holistic business model that you have to be thinking about when you're doing not just batteries, but when you're doing actual products. So
And are
those are the
you
things you.
as a company fully integrated, or do you go all the way to what is your starting point? You get raw materials and then you take it from there.
Yeah, so the batteries themselves currently we manufacture all on our own, from the
Got it.
raws all the way through to the batteries. We're looking at joint ventures right now for higher volume manufacturing all around the world because of the commercial needs that's on us. So we're looking at partnerships with other battery companies or strategic partners when it comes to the manufacturing of the batteries. And then when you look at the product solutions, in this case, I'm using one vertical, just data centers. But when you look at that vertical, we work with partners, outside manufacturers, to take our batteries and put them into those battery cabinets for the data center space. And so we right now have one of those currently online here in the US. We'll have another one before the end of the year, a second one. And then we continue to hope to have those expansions around partnerships across the world for that matter. So if you hear me, Nathan, what I'm saying is how you broaden your penetration in commercial markets, not just data centers, but others, is through partnerships. If you try to do it all on your own, you'll never get there fast enough. And so partnerships on every level of what you do in a business model are the keys to success.
Is there a green premium on your product today? From a
Yeah,
cost perspective, how does it compare to the existing alternatives?
there is, and it's one of the things that we're actually working on to try to quantify even further. Because with all the information I've shared with you so far, yes, the carbon payback, all those sorts of things are real. And so we're working on programs right now to be able to illustrate that to not only customers, but suppliers and alike, because everybody wants to partner up with companies that have this sort of an impact. So we're working on that as we speak, but we think the outcome is going to be very nice.
Got it. And asking differently, does it cost more today to adopt a nickel zinc battery compared to a lead acid battery because of the fact that this is a technology that is more sustainable?
Yeah.
And if so, how do you expect to what are the technical challenges or industrial challenges that you're working on to bring that cost differential down?
Sure. So when you look at, we'll just use data centers because it's a massive market. But
Yeah.
when you look at data centers, the incumbent technology that's been around for years is lead acid, right? And so when you look at the penetration that lithium has had in the data center space, somewhere around in the last 5 years, somewhere around 30%. Lithium entered this space being a much higher upfront cost, and still is, than lead acid. And frankly speaking, it's just
Mm.
lead acid is very inexpensive to manufacture. So the industry is prepared to pay more because they're moving more towards this short duration discharging. And once again, lead acid just isn't a great fit. So
Yeah.
so when you take a look at all the wins that we have right now, all those commercial wins are frankly against lithium. Okay, because it's not really
Got
competing
it.
against lead
Okay.
at that short duration. So when you look at that, our cost, upfront cost over lithium, is slightly higher, but the
Yeah.
advantages that we have are safety. You don't need the fire suppression in the building. We operate at higher temperatures, so the consumption of utility power, which by the way, data centers are the most massive consumer of power around the world, that if you can operate your data centers at a lower temperature, or higher, in this case, higher temperature, hence the reduction in your energy consumption, which is a major play. The third thing over
Yeah.
lithium that we have is the huge climate impact sustainability story and recyclability story, which these data centers are vocal about, many of them vocal about their climate impact and carbon neutrality by 2025, for example. So this is real. This is a real thing. And then here in the United States, I'll point out one other thing, is the data centers here in the United States are getting a tremendous amount of pressure, regulatory pressure, about using lithium versus other battery chemistries from safety
Mm.
perspective. So, and that regulatory pressure, Nathan, is coming from the National Fire Protection Association. So it's a real thing. And then the fire marshals locally jump in too when data centers are even considering lithium, say, over a safer choice like ZincFive.
You have today, I think, about more than 100 patents for this technology, if I'm not mistaken. Um, what are the key attributes of your culture that you cultivate to foster this level of innovation and growth?
Yeah, if you recall, I mentioned that we merged with Powergenics in November of 2016. All of the patents that had been created at that time were all around the manufacturing of the nickel zinc batteries, building a nickel zinc battery that has this high power, immediate discharging of 15 minutes or less, and perfecting that. And so you can imagine the massive amount of patents that existed there that we inherited when we merged the two companies together. And then since then, we now have patents on the solutions. So, as just an example, in our traffic application where we back up signalized intersections, we have a battery that literally bends and goes into a one inch space. That's patented. So you can see
Mhm.
we have patents across the whole life cycle, if you will. We hope to have some intellectual property in the next year or so around recyclability that will make our story even better, where it will be smelt free, for example. Those things are all important. But if you're asking about the culture, what motivates people for that, as I always say to our entire company, let's go change the world, right? We have the opportunity
Mhm.
to go change the world when it comes to climate impact, when it comes to our technology. And so we hire the type of people where they're motivated to do that, right? It's just part of their DNA. And so that's a little bit about the IP portfolio, but also the culture we drive to make it happen.
Tim, let's talk a little bit about your customers. So far, we've talked about data centers. Are there other segments of customers that you are able to serve with your technology? You mentioned the traffic lights,
Yeah.
intermittent power. So that might be another one. What are the key applications beyond data centers that you enable?
Yes. So, really good question. So, we talked a lot about relative to short duration, 15 minutes and less. But there's another product that we launched here in Q1 of 2022, and it's an industrial starting battery solution. So, what we haven't talked about, Nathan, is our batteries, our nickel zinc batteries, have a massive amount of cranking capacity compared to other battery chemistries. So, when you take a
Hmm.
look at where you need that cranking capacity, an example of that is these large megawatt generators that they sit there idle doing nothing at a data center. And then when utility power is lost, we bridge the gap between the data center or between utility power and the generator. But now that generator, it's really mission critical that it starts, right? And so
Yes.
these huge generators have massive cranking needs. So I'll give you a competitive example. Most commonly in that space, you're using lead acid technologies. They're called 8D batteries. So they're quite large. In fact, one 8D battery takes up the space of two of our batteries that we use for this. Now, let me just give you
Hmm.
an illustration. It takes four of those 8D batteries or more to crank up a large generator. Our battery package is the size of one of those 8D batteries. We have more cranking
Got it.
capacity. We have longer life. They don't have to worry about the recyclability and the fade that you get with lead acid. There's just so many advantages for using our nickel zinc batteries for that kind of use case. It's hard to even comprehend. And plus, it comes back to the climate impact story, right? You can imagine the
Yes.
tree illustration. We have a tree illustration for that particular market as well. But answer a few of your other questions around this topic, is anything for short duration. So there's a lot of needs out there for what's called peak shaving, right? When utility rates are incredibly high, you want to avoid
Yes.
those peak rates. And so using batteries once again for very short duration will be great at that. If you take a look at the electric vehicle market, one of the concerns around the electric vehicle market isn't just the supply chain of lithium batteries, but it's also the charging infrastructure, right,
Hmm.
around the
Hmm.
world. Well, you don't stand up additional power for EV charging overnight. It's a very long, expensive process. So we believe there's a real opportunity to have portable EV charging stations, right? Where you can take them
Yeah.
around. say the likes of Amazon, FedEx, it doesn't matter when they want go to charge all their electric fleet vehicles at one time, going to be very difficult to do that off the grid. So using batteries and other forms. Now we would just be a partner within that solution with a longer duration battery, right? But there's again
Yeah.
another market that we see. So there's a lot of excitement around the world. You know, when you take a look at what we've done so far, it's really just mostly North America and a few things outside of the U.S. But as we spread the word, ZincFive is going to be very, very.
And
We already are very busy.
and precisely on the topic of going to new segments and new geographies, you recently completed a $75 million Series D investment, and congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, what do you intend to use the funds for?
Yeah, so short term, the funds are used. Well, short term, we're looking at the funds to be used for establishing U.S. based manufacturing. Right now, we manufacture our batteries in China with our own people, our own equipment. But there are many, many commercial things happening to us this year. I'll give you an example. We're experiencing, oh gosh, 12x growth from last year to
Mm,
this year. 12x growth in that battery cabinet, right? So you can
yeah.
imagine what's going through our minds at ZincFive. And a lot of those customers are here in North America. Some of them are in Iceland and Canada and other places. But the use of proceeds we want to have, we want to stand up a US based manufacturing facility for all the right reasons here in the US. But that's part of the use of proceeds. We're going through such a fast growth rate with employees. We're currently at 180 employees worldwide. You know, we'll probably be close to 250 by the end of next year. It's just that kind of infrastructure that's being built as we speak. And so, you know, the Series D raise was exciting, but you know, the growth capital that's in front of us is more exciting.
What is it that happened that explains that you unlocked this 12x growth in the battery cabinets? What, did you manage to crack something product wise, or did customers wake up to maybe did the preferences of customers change and they started paying more attention to some of the criteria that you helped them answer better? What happened?
Yeah, it really started with, you know, and as you've heard me say, you can't just have a great battery, you have to have a solution, right? And so we've been working on that solution, in this case, the 265 kW battery cabinet, for a couple of years. And while we were doing that, Nathan, what we did is our sales team, relatively small sales team, had been going out to the actual operators of data centers and starting to tell them that, hey, this is coming. This is the advantages of nickel zinc, ZincFive, footprint, safety, reliability, all these things, sustainability. And it created a real buzz. And so
Mm,
those data center customers then started to going to their suppliers, the likes of ABB, Vertiv, Schneider, Eaton, and so on, and said, hey, why aren't you offering me ZincFive and nickel zinc batteries? It sounds like something we would really want. And so while those two things were happening in parallel, plus we were going and working with design firms, right, who
yeah.
design data centers. And when you're designing data centers, if you need less fire suppression, you need less space for your batteries, all of those things are very meaningful. And so it was a multifaceted approach. And so I can't point to one thing. If I had
Yeah.
to, I would say the launch of a product that people could no longer look away and sort of, you know, push off until you're ready. We're ready.
Yeah.
So, and there's customer polling, you know, customers polling at everybody to get our technology adopted. So that you know, collectively is the reason. And then, you know, once they hear our sustainability story, and the pressures on these data centers are immense to be,
Mm.
you know, more friendly to the climate. So they're looking at every piece of their supply chain and who's doing something to impact that.
Tim, for the last few minutes that we have, for those of us who are not familiar with the market landscape in that part of the industry, can you explain a bit the interplay between the different stakeholders that you mentioned? So the data center operators, the ABB, Schneider firms, like
Hmm.
what do these do? Where do they come in? And then the design firms, how does that? What is the role of these different players? And it sounds like you
Yeah.
have to have a multi, as you said, multifaceted sales conversation, playing on these different uh, grounds, basically, to make your product more known and more familiar to these different stakeholders.
Yes. And so I would start at a high level, Nathan, and say when you take a look at any industry, and in particular data centers, you're asking how much opportunity is what's called a brownfield or existing data centers that need to replace their batteries with something new. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have the greenfield, which is new data center builds. And so predominantly we've been focusing on the new data center builds because they're designing data centers to be, less space with batteries, less fire suppress, all these things, right? Higher power density, etc. So when you look at now the market segmentation, you have what's called hyperscalers. Think of
Mm,
hyperscalers as the likes of AWS, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and so on. You also then have what's called enterprise or even co-location providers where they build data centers to lease space to customers, their
yes.
computing space. So when you take a look at those segments, outside of the hyperscalers, all those other data centers really are their sales and support organizations to them are the likes of these large corporations like ABB, Vertiv, Schneider, Eaton, and so on. Okay.
Got it. Got it.
And so now that you have that, then you say, okay, well, where's the different products needed for each of those? Okay. So if I start at the hyperscaler level, they are trying to take battery backup and distributing it further and further downstream, closer to the demand need. So our battery cabinet is meant to be at the end of in a large battery room or at the end of a server row, but the hyperscalers want to put the battery backup at the bottom of the server rack. Okay.
Yes.
So you see
Yeah.
how it's getting distributed further, closer to the load. So we've been working with hyperscalers close to 3 years now, and we believe we're getting pretty close. I can't name a name or names, but we feel like we're getting very, very close because of all the advantages in the space and all the things that come with our technology for the bottom of the server racks. There's even work being done, taking it a step further, Nathan, and that's taking and putting battery backup into each individual server.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Hmm.
you can see the domino effect of where the battery backup is being applied. Now
And
that's
obviously,
predominantly all.
your technology being more dense, more compact, enables this thing which was more difficult before.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and I won't go deep in the technology, but there's a thing around reliability, right? What's
Yeah.
something unique about ZincFive's nickel zinc batteries is every manufacturer strings batteries together. What's unique about ZincFive is if one of those batteries in that string were to fail, the whole system doesn't have to shut down due to
Yes.
safety, thermal runaway, explosion. That is so meaningful to a data center because now it's planned maintenance. It's not
Mm.
catastrophic emergency maintenance, for example. So yeah, it's a really big deal. So you have, battery cabinets, batteries, backups going to the bottom of server racks, going into servers, and so it's a massive, massive market that we believe we have a huge advantage over.
Tim, to finish, I'd like to talk about the team. Clearly, 180 to about 230 employees soon. What are
Mhm.
the key skills, the key competencies that you need to have in the team to be able to achieve what you're doing?
Well, you look at number one, the markets we're going after, and do we have the team to go after those markets? Number one. Number two, do we have? People ask me all the time, "Gosh, you guys must really be big into R&D, right?
Yeah,
Research and development." And I always say, we're little R and big D, right?
got
And
it.
what I
Yes.
mean by that is, there's no real research that needs to be done on our battery chemistry, right? We can continue to make it better. By the way, there's a lot of headroom with what we can do with the battery chemistry, but it's a viable commercial battery chemistry today in these immediate power applications. And so back to your question about how you build out this infrastructure is it's operational infrastructure, it's sales and marketing, it's engineering around development of new products. But even that, Nathan, we contract a lot of that out. We
Mhm.
serve as really the experts around the technology and the intellectual knowledge of what to do with it, but we try to contract and partner out with as much of that as we can.
Got it.
So it's all of these things as you're building out this infrastructure. And let's not forget manufacturing capacity, right? We right now will finish this year with the ability to generate about 120 to 130 million dollars in revenue for next year. We have that capacity now. To stand up another 100, but this is unique about ZincFive, nickel-zinc, to stand up another manufacturing facility that can generate 100 to 150 million dollars in top line revenue is a 25 million dollar investment.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty low capex cost. So yeah, I tell you that to your question because it's all of these things that are intertwined that you have to be thinking about, and the people that you need to continue to generate on this fast of a growth rate.
As you look back since you started the journey in, let's say, 2016, even though there was a preamble to that, what is the thing that has surprised you the most about this industry and your journey that you did not expect at the beginning?
I didn't expect to have to build products,
Mm.
right? I thought I was naive enough to think that if you had a battery chemistry that had all of these advantages and you knew what market to play in, that I thought industries would just sort of clamor to the chemistry, or in
Yeah.
this case to nickel zinc. I was wrong. I was wrong. Um, Everybody's too busy in their own lives. Each industry is, to adopt new technologies. And keep in mind, Nathan, the markets we go after are mission critical. So people are already risk adverse
Yes.
to any
You don't
new
want to
technology,
change
and
something that you
they
cannot
don't want to change.
have less than 100% of the
Yeah.
time on.
So when you take away virtually every pain point they have with regards to adopting your technology, and it's better, and you have customers pulling at the industry to say, "I want this," that's the beauty of it. But I would say the one thing that stands out to me is, and it is that issue of you can't just be a battery chemistry; you have to be a solutions provider. But I would also say, in a bigger picture, that it all takes so much longer than you think it's going to
Mhm.
take to get to these places like we're at today. And the amount of capital it takes to get to where we are today is over $100 million, if not closer to 200 million, to get to where we are today.
Yeah.
And I really encourage other battery chemistries to, even if you're early stage, to keep swinging. If you really have something that's going to change the world, if it's going to make it slightly better, you've probably got a really long road ahead of you, or maybe a short road because you won't get funding. But
Yeah.
I root for all battery chemistries that really have something meaningful for the world.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I look forward to re-listening to it actually, uh, and um, and I wish you the best for the future of your company.
Well, Nathan, thank you for giving us an opportunity. We enjoy sharing our story. We think it's unique, and we're really excited where we are today and in our future and what it means to the world. So thanks for having us.
You can find out more about ZincFive on their website, zincfive.com, including the links to the studies Tim mentioned. If you enjoyed this episode, follow up on your favorite podcast app and stay tuned for more insightful conversations with some of the most inspiring climate tech founders.